Greetings and salutations, travelers. Welcome back to the Inn of Planar Crossroads. And also, welcome back to our house specials, specifically our continuing coverage of the slowly developing kind of developer vlog thing of the Realm of Atar and the whole Adventure Academia, that's what it was. The whole Adventure Academia. We've done episode 2 already. That's what we're going to do a recap of here in a minute. And then we're going to do the coverage of the new installation, the new encounter. Encounter number 3 it will be. Or really, you'll see that it's going to be an extension of encounter number 2. Before we get into that, if you like the content that you see here, you can support it on Patreon or Subscribestar by checking the Inn of Planar Crossroads. If you are enjoying this as one of my students at the homeschool group, then you can let me know down in the comments below how much you're enjoying it or how much you hate it. Either way, that is okay. Just leave it in the comment section below. But that's all I've got for announcements, I think. So let's go ahead and jump into the reflections for episode number 2. Episode 2, the rescue mission portion, it came out pretty well. I actually had volunteers for reading this last time, more than any other time, because I told them I was in my older group. I told them I'm going to start calling on people if people don't start volunteering to read. So I guess they took that to heart and decided, hey, we better go ahead and do that. So I believe I read Rescue Mission, the Rescue Mission description, from Hildegard's perspective and stuff. And then the student read the encounter. So the setup and everything for Hildegard and all that, it went well. And the kids appreciated that idea. They were able to solidify that a bit in their head and better understand it, which was good. When it came to the encounter, the kids, and this is something that we will see in the probably in the future in a few places too. There is going to be a divergence from what the older kids do to what the younger kids do. So in the older group, which comes first, they in the whole encounter setup, it was set up around the idea that I had put them before any of the action started. So Wilhelm and Remigius and Maximilian and Hildegard had all snuck up onto the camp of the goblins, and they were about to attack. There were 3 sleeping piles. There was a hot spring where they were going to where the goblins were going to try and, I guess, broil the gnomes or something to get some of their food, eat them as food. But that's beside the point because that did not happen. So the older and the younger group kind of took the same approach, spreading out around and positioning themselves before they initiated a battle. They didn't just run in, which is good to see, that even the younger kids didn't just run in. But I'll get to them in a minute. So with the older kids, they set up themselves. They kind of decided they wanted to do sneaky stuff and everything. And because this was only the second time that they had used the characters in a mechanical sense, because the first whole thing was setting up different. The first one was setting up the Realm of Atar, the first class, and they did very little actual rolling or math parts because it was trying to set them up mentally to be ready for the game that was going to help them better grasp their mathematical arrangements. This one, they started to get a better feel for the mechanics, and I had to nudge a little bit on which way they wanted to go with things, ask them which way they wanted to go with things, because the sneaky part was everybody was okay with that. But they spent like 15 minutes, and I was looking at my clock, kind of. And it's like, I'm not going to give them forever to figure out what they want to do. We're going to start this party real quick. So that is one suggestion I have. Don't give them more than 15 minutes to plan. If you're running this in a class, don't give them more than 15 minutes to plan their angle of attack or what they're going to do. Give them a set amount of time. Set it for yourself or tell them there's only this much amount of time. And then go into it. Because the class had been going for about 15 minutes. So to be fair, they probably spent about 10 minutes, 12 minutes discussing what to do, which is not too bad considering how long regular adventuring groups, if you're playing this as a hobby, can take to decide to do things. But that said, because it's a class, give them a little guidance through. Ask them, hey, do you want to sneak or do you want to, what are you doing? Where's everybody going to be? What are your plans that you're trying to execute here? They were smart about putting Remigius near the cages. They had Wilhelm with Remigius for protection because, they're both melee characters, but Wilhelm is obviously going to be more tanky. Hildegard was positioned in a place where she wouldn't be outright targeted because she is the healer. She keeps everybody else healthy. So you want the white mage protected type of thing for anybody that knows RPGs. And then Maximilian, they actually sent him a little further on by himself than I thought they would. They had him all the way to the north of the arrangement. If you go to north on the board, if you go to the In a Planar Crossroads on YouTube's community tab, I post a picture, or I try to post a picture each time, and have every time so far, of the Adventure Academia layout of each encounter. What the board looks like, basically, at the start, with the whole eldest class. And then you guys get to see where I start them out. They had everybody positioned, and they decided to go with the flame wall, which was smart. It prevented the other goblins from immediately charging or hawking, or the fungus goblin, hawking loogies at Wilhelm or anybody they could see. So that was good that they did that. The thing that they ran into was just how well they did. As a whole, I think that the older class rolled better than the younger class this time, which was not the case last time. So what ended up happening, and you'll see this reflected in the next set of next episode description. So all of this starts to happen, and I won't spoil that until we get there. But they basically both classes took out the first two goblins pretty quickly. And because of the way combat works, there's a lot of rolls back and forth that have to happen. They were doing all the math. I had them doing all the math. And one thing to do is to try and keep it focused, because what will happen is the kids that are the fastest at math will end up blurting out answers. So I'm adopting the idea of the person that rolls does the math. And this shouldn't be too hard for the kids, because we go around the table, we take turns, and they're rolling for each of the characters that come around in the initiative order and stuff like that. So there's no reason that they can't be prepared mentally to be able to do some math. They're coming to the class called Adventure Academia knowing that it was described to be doing math and other problem solving, which is what the strategy is for. Where do you want to be on the board? Why do you want to be there? Who's going to do what? That's strategic. And they're employing different stratagems to be able to adapt and overcome obstacles. So, and building teamwork and stuff like that. So that part's working out well. But making the person that does the roll do the final math will be something that I think I'm going to adopt further and do more of. Now, that doesn't mean if they get a little confused on their math problem solvings that I don't kind of walk them through it, and have the class assist in walking through. But the final check will be done the final assessment of, is this the answer, will be up to the person that rolled. So, with that said, that just gets everybody involved. Because there's so many different things happening at once, having so many people actually wasn't a problem because they were also rolling. So that was helpful and might be useful for people that are actually running large groups in general, is having everybody rolls. You take turns rolling on everything. Can be helpful. Let me see. The difference between the divergence that happened between the younger class and the older class is the older class with that third what was it? Pile. The third compost pile that was larger. They almost immediately, after the other two goblins were dealt with, put a cage around that one. So they had to drop. They dropped the firewall that you guys will hear about in a minute, that Maximilian made and they made a fire cage instead around that big pile. Now, the plan was to have the largest, the larger goblin that I'm going to read about in a minute, come out of that pile. Because they did that, though, I adjusted it so that he came from down the mountain. He had been scouting, perhaps, or finding stuff and looking about. So that's what I had for him. And I will, and you have to do that sometimes to continue to promote drama. Because if I'd let them trapped him right there, we wouldn't be able to have this next encounter, and they wouldn't have been able to deal with him. Now, he's tougher. He is tougher. He has a much higher guard than the other creatures. But he also is, he should be more of a challenge appropriate for all four of them to be dealing with at a time. Because they will have to do that. And they're going to have to learn this coming time, hey, people need to be bolstering other people. If your big hitters can't hit, then you got to bolster them to do so, and you got to support them. So there's going to have to be a little bit more inner workings of the mechanics of the characters, and that hopefully is what they'll grasp onto this next time, instead of just having Maximilian or Wilhelm completely do most of the damage. And that'll come. They're either going to have to do that. I'm either going to have to get them to do that. So we're getting pretty close to time on trying to cover that. So let me get to that was their difference. That was the main divergence, was that they were going to trap the hobgoblin immediately, that's the stats I'm using, is a hobgoblin who's a bit stronger in 1E than he is in Open Legend than he is in something like Pathfinder or D&D, because in those they're about as strong as a regular player character or PC. But in this, they are able to face about 3 to 4 PCs because of how strong their guard is. Not necessarily their other stats, as I'm sure the group will find out. But coming back to the main divergence there was that fire cage. So the older group immediately did that. So I will know in the future that is something they will expect. They will be watching how many piles. If there is 3, where's the other one? We're going to cage this right away. So change that up in your games if you want to. If we were running a longer game, I would not have changed it to where... I wouldn't have necessarily changed it to where the group wasn't able to capture him. Wasn't able to cage him right away. Or it. The goblins don't have genders. They're just magical creatures. They don't have those things, anything like that. They don't reproduce naturally. So anyway, that's some lore for the goblins. The younger group did not cage that portion. They still set up the firewall, kind of at my nudging. So I nudged a little bit on where okay, well, where do you want to be if you're sneaking in there, or if you're going to release them, and so on and so forth. And Remigius had no problem opening the cages for any of them when they were releasing the gnomes, so that wasn't a problem. But their positioning was important. So their positioning came into play, and the group was pretty well, even the younger group was pretty well on point about thinking about things. And I asked them where they wanted to put stuff, and where did they want things to go. And the younger group actually wanted to include one of the sleeping piles. I believe it was the younger group. Wanted to include one of the sleeping piles. Well, it turned out it was the sleeping pile of... No, it was the older group that did this, but I incorporated it in suggestion to the younger group. That include one of the sleeping piles of the goblin, so that they would... of one of the goblins, so that they maybe would catch one in there, and it would be caught off guard if there were more in there, which there was not. Those were its sleeping piles. They caught the one on fire that was the fire goblins. I mean, the fungus goblins. And so poof, there was that big there was a puff of explosion with that because of all the secretions of the fungus goblin. But they locked off the fungus goblin and the moss goblin over by the spring. They had a whole thing that went through with theirs about the goblin running into each other and stuff like that, and things exploding. It's in the description here in a minute. But the other portion was that they didn't put that cage up, so I did have the goblin rise out of the hobgoblin rise out of the the larger compost pile. And this was because of some rolls. Now, I was rolling to see if they were going to get a surprise round. I had both the older and the youngers. The youngers diverged in that Remigius and the others did not roll as well in their stealth, so they did not get a surprise round. The olders rolled enough where they got a surprise round on these creatures, and that's how they were able to make it to where they got to have their extra chance to cage that larger compost pile, whereas with the others it did not. The youngers did not. So that actually happened the way I planned it with them. But they did have a lot of fun with the exploding goblins. And the goblins did their normal thing of dropping their creatures that Grum had used to make them. So, all in all, as far as reflections on how it went, aside from those small divergences, I was easily able to corral that back into the main portion of the story, and we will see that right now when we get to episode 3, because this one is going to be an extension of the last encounter, because neither of them were able to take out the hobgoblin in time, because classes are only an hour. So this is something that is going to be for the class as a continuation. This is kind of a test to see. So let's get into it. Episode 3, A Prickly Situation. Appropriate for there being a hobgoblin, or in this case, a thorn goblin. So the headcanon is that he's made out of a locust thorn tree. Or it's made out of a locust thorn tree. So, Episode 3, A Prickly Situation. And I'll read the flavor text like normal and give any kind of ideas on it before we go. Maximilian had never gotten used to this little body he was trapped in. What bothered him most was not the short stature, nor the fur, nor even the annoying cravings for bugs and other odd culinary delights. It was the heartbeat. It beat so fast. He sometimes felt that were it not. He sometimes felt that were it not for his fastened robes, it might fly right out of his chest. These flutterings were at their worst in stressful moments, and sneaking up on the goblins had been just such a situation. Thankfully, everyone had been able to get into position before the fighting started. So let me fix that grammar real quick. Okay. His hands shook as he prepared to work the magics through his crystal. "Just stay focused," he chanted to himself. "You won't lose control again if you stay focused." His flame wall would signal to the others to begin freeing the captive gnomes. It was up to him. Eyes staring directly where he needed the flame wall, he began to imagine the flames. As a slight heat emanated from the red crystal atop his staff, he began reciting one of the many poems available to entice the flow of magics through the shard, and to his desired purpose. "Red, red glow the flames, hot is the passion they show. Stand now between us and they, as coals make the air glow." As he recited the verse quietly, but with measured intent, he could feel the power begin to flow. It was warm. No, it was hot. It poured into him. It made him uncomfortable. It was burning. It felt pent up. He felt the heat in him, smelled the air, the heat in the air. See it with his own eyes. It hurt. It always hurt. Maximilian knew that in these brief moments of casting, there was always the chance of breaking concentration, or missing a word, or positioning the staff incorrectly. So many things could go wrong. So many things. But when the incantation ended, the concentrated flow burst into life exactly where he had intended, and the anguish vanished. He hadn't lost himself. Not this time. And so, there is Maximilian's perspective. Let me fix something real quick before we continue. Okay, got those fixed a little bit. So with that, hopefully I'm building up some, because I have to, with these quick little sessions, I have to build up the lore while I'm in this stuff, in these tight little moments. And hopefully that's building up the lore of how magic works in this particular setting for the kids. Not necessarily that they'll care, but I care. So, I've been liking so far having each of these come from a different perspective. We had mainly Wilhelm the first time, then we have Hildegard, now we have Maximilian, and next time we'll have Remigius. And each of them's having a different perspective on this situation that they find themselves in. So, and now we kind of understand why Hildegard questioned herself on why Maximilian would be so reluctant to use his magics. Now we see kind of why. He used his magics before, lost control. That's kind of what that's alluding to. And that's probably alluding to his accident, most likely. And then, now he does not want to do that again. But he has to practice the magics to be able to undo the problem he has. So you see the catch-22. So, and the way that magic works and focused and stuff like that, it can hurt while it's happening and while you're doing the incantation and so on. So I think that is going to work well for at least the lore build out. The kids might not appreciate it, but I did. So you can let me know in the comments below if you think it's silly to build out any kind of lore that way with the when the kids won't care. All right, so now we come to the encounter. And, of course, as usual, they have the boxes to doodle in if they need them, or to make the encounter field. So, next is the encounter. As the flame wall burst into life, so did Remigius. He and Wilhelm had been hiding together near the cages. They strode forward and immediately went to work. The locks on the cages were child's play to open for someone as skilled with thieves' tools as Remigius. Wilhelm provided a physical wall between him and any adversaries. The two goblins by the spring were completely taken aback by the fiery barrier. Their surprise was only magnified when the flames touched the fungus goblin's sleeping pile, causing a small explosion. The frustrated fungus goblin ran around to the south of the barrier to try getting within spitting distance of the Minotaur, but was thwarted by his own comrade. You see, Hildegard had blinded the moss goblin with her holy magics, and in its panic it ran through the south part of the wall instead of around it, catching itself on fire and running directly into the incendiary fungus goblin. Both exploded in a brilliant display of red fire and green magics. The two sprites that Grum had used to make the goblins fell to the ground, seemingly unharmed. Thinking the fight over, Maximilian dropped the flame wall and started to move toward the others. That proved a hasty assumption, however, when out of the larger sleeping pile rose a much bigger goblin. He was at least 4 feet tall, twice the size of the previous two goblins, and was thickly muscled. On his gray hide, for it was more hide than skin, were multitudinous thorns. The longest of the thorns formed a strip of spikes that ran from the very top of its head to the base of where its spine would be. It held a spear that seemed to be made of a large thorn, similar to the ones covering its body, and had a makeshift bow. This creature was going to be tougher than the others. Will the heroes defeat it and get to the now freed gnomes to safety? And so there we pick up. And so you kind of see a little summary of the previous encounter, which was useful, I would say, because the kids, you don't know this necessarily, but the reason that there was no reflection last week of when this one comes out, and instead we had a Around the Hearth, was 1, we recorded the Around the Hearth, and 2, we had a spring break type of thing. So I was actually looking forward to coming back with the kids and doing some more of this. But they wanted to do spring break stuff. So anyway, so the homeschool group is coming back this week that this will post. Because this posts either the day of or the day after we have these. We have these games that they are these classes of Adventure Academia that is using a game to teach math and stuff. So I think this encounter continuation will work well for letting me test out how efficient that will be, because with us having a spring break, it's going to be 7 weeks instead of 8 weeks, and I'm glad I didn't end up further planning out all of these, like how many encounters I was going to do and what it was going to lead up to in 8 weeks. Because if you have 4 weeks to do one thing and 4 weeks to do the other thing, that's kind of a safe bet. But as far as the other stuff, I'm thinking the kids might need that little recap since we had that break. I'd prefer like an 8-week set, but that's me, like I said. So the plan for this one is to basically continue that fight. I don't think it'll be a problem for the kids. They seem pretty invested, but this guy's got a pretty strong AC for level 1 characters. They got to be working together in some way or debuffing him or doing things. They need to be using the characters. And if they're a little rusty, that might be why they wouldn't be able to beat him in a single 1 hour setting. But because the battle's already been started, there's not much problem with that. So this is the idea, getting the group there going. So that's what I've got on the encounter. I hope that the kids enjoy it. Some side thoughts that don't necessarily apply to this encounter but are applying further in backward and forward in the campaign is I have been implementing. I know that I said before I wasn't using minimum damage because Remigius would be unconscious when that happened, but in the first fight. But I have moved into that. I think I may have to with this encounter, because it speeds up the game enough to make it where the hour might be enough. Because this guy's got like a 20-something AC, and that's not nearly impossible or anything, but it is a hard challenge. It is a hard fight for a physical. That's his guard, so it's a physical thing. So Remigius and Wilhelm, they might have a harder time if the kids don't use any of their other skills besides just hit the thing with weapon. Of course, Hildegard and Maximilian can do things to him a lot easier, but the trick is he's up in melee with the other guys, so with the other party members. So minimum damage is a thing in Open Legend where you basically do 3 damage when you do something, even if you miss, unless it's like a critical fail where you miss by more than 10, then bad stuff happens. But I don't think they'll have to worry about that. We will see, because he is a tougher opponent. He is. So next time it will actually be a more interesting discussion, probably. But we are about over time on this, so it's probably going to be like a little over 30 minutes. Sorry about that. I'm trying to keep it down, but at least you have timestamps in the comment section below. So not in the comment section. You have timestamps in the description below for chapters on the bar. So there you go. I hope you guys enjoyed, and Prickly Situation should be fun to reflect on. I'm interested to see how they do facing a single strong opponent versus an opponent who is these smaller, easy opponents with the goblins. Because the goblins still did some tough stuff to them. That is something about Open Legend, is you can have, because of the way that success and failure works, and explosions, you could have a low-level thing give a party problems if it rolls really well, or goes for a different defense than what they're good at. So we will have to see how this one goes on. Anyway, I think that's everything. As always, have a great day, God bless, and enjoy. Bye.
This content was made possible by travelers and viewers like you. Thank you.
As he recited the verse quietly. Blah. Okay, that's done. Loud dogs, but that's done. Alright. We'll see if they just torch this guy. I'm highly suspecting that I have a hunch that they're going to use magic a lot more. It means I'm going to have to throw something magic resistant at them at some point, just to get them thinking more. But that's the usual problems with running games that have magic in them. Anyway.